Hello, and welcome to Just Unjust, a podcast featuring stories of injustice from around the United States. This installment is different than previous episodes. Typically, I serve as the main narrator, using my voice to help people tell their stories of injustice. This case, however, I felt needed to be told differently, and largely by the person who has lived this nightmare himself. So many rumors and speculation continue to cloud this case that I felt it even more important to hand the platform over and give this person an opportunity to tell his story in his own words. This story also cannot be told in a typical 30 to 60 minute time slot, so this case will be featured as a special multi-part series of 101 interviews with Tracy Zornes, a man convicted of a horrific double homicide in Minnesota back in 2010 with no hard evidence against him. Tracy has maintained his innocence from day one, and a recent independent investigation has revealed powerful new evidence that points to an alternate perpetrator. Tracy is currently serving life without parole for conviction based on sheer circumstantial evidence, poor initial investigation, and ignoring of evidence that points to a different perpetrator or perpetrators. This is Just Unjust. Tracy's case is very involved, very unusual, and the accusations against him and the prosecution's theory of the case just don't make a lot of sense. After spending considerable time examining the ins and outs of his case, it felt like Tracy has never been given the opportunity to tell his story in his own words and shed light on what happened in his case. His pleas to be heard have repeatedly fallen on the deaf ears of the criminal justice system, so this is why I felt the best way to profile his case was to let him tell his own story, mostly on his own. There's a lot to cover: the actual crime, the indictment of Tracy for the crime, the trial, Tracy's multiple appeals of his conviction, a new and extensive post-conviction investigation that uncovered a different possible perpetrator, and his attempts to get his case back into court. Let's get into Tracy's story. In the early morning hours of February 19, 2010, a fire broke out in an apartment complex in Moorhead, Minnesota. After battling the blaze, first responders discovered the beaten and charred bodies of 25-year-old Meghan Londo and 20-year-old John Cadot inside. Neither Meghan nor John were residents of that apartment. The apartment belonged to a woman named Cassie Cruz and her boyfriend Saul Grotto. Meghan was staying at the apartment while Cassie and Saul were supposedly out of town. Tracy, Meghan, and John had spent the day together. Tracy was needing a ride back to his home on the White Earth Indian Reservation, and Meghan had said she could arrange a ride back for him. Meghan invited Tracy and John over to Cassie Cruz's apartment while they tried to figure out a ride back home for Tracy. As the evening went on, Cassie learned that people other than Meghan were at her apartment. Tracy said he overheard Cassie, who was on the phone with Meghan, state that she was going to send some people over to kick everyone out. Fearing the potential for police due to an active warrant Tracy had for burglary in another county, Tracy left the apartment in John's car and went over to visit his girlfriend about a mile away. He eventually left his girlfriend's apartment and headed back to where Meghan and John were. When he was down the street from where Meghan and John were in Cassie's apartment, he suddenly saw a series of first responder vehicles with emergency lights flashing, rushing in the same direction of Cassie's apartment. Once again, fearing being in an area with police presence, he turned around, and instead of continuing in the apartment like he originally planned, Tracy headed home to the White Earth Indian Reservation. Not long after he arrived home, Tracy learned of the fire that had happened and the discovery of Meghan and John's bodies. Because Tracy was upfront about the fact that he and Meghan and John had been together earlier that day, and the fact that he was driving John's car, he became the prime suspect in the brutal double homicide of his friends and was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life without parole, although no hard evidence showed he had anything to do with the murders. Tracy, start by taking us back to the events that occurred in February 2010 and tell us how this all came to be.
The event, they were part of a whole week of events leading up to that particular day. The week before, my ex-girlfriend was in Nadawash, and she was selling some pills to hustle up some money, and she had to be back to work in Fargo, which is, 80 miles away. So I told her, well, she had only sold half of it. She said she was trying to save up money to get an apartment for her and her son. So I said, well, I would sell the rest of them and bring her the money. So I did that, and then Saturday night I was going to get a ride. My buddy Tony and Pam, they gave me a ride over there, and then waited for Liz to get off work. So after Liz got off work, we went to a bar for a little while, and that was kind of how that whole week went. Sat around. Well, she went to work. I sat around drinking and just doing most of nothing, I guess. That week pretty much drank every day, or I did at least. She went to work the night when these crimes occurred. I'd been trying to call to get a ride, and then somebody told me that Meghan was over here and she had a ride back. So got the number and called them.
Someone told you Meghan Londo had a ride back to the reservation.
Yeah.
And Meghan was a friend of yours, right? You knew each other from the reservation?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Natiwash is kind of small, so most everybody knows everybody. It's a small village on the reservation. So I know a lot of her family and all of that. She was with my cousin Brian for a number of years. They have 2 kids together. And her mother lived right next door to my sisters.
So just so I get this straight, Meghan lived on the reservation, as did you, and she was in town, and you had contacted her because you heard that she might have a ride lined back up to go home to the reservation.
Yeah. And she said that there was somebody, after they got off work at the casino in Monoman, they were going to come pick her up. That was the plan. So they came, they stopped at the bottle barn, and I grabbed my bag and I went out and got in with them. After we left there, Meghan and John Cadot, it was his car, and we drove over some neighborhood kind of north of there. Where we had stopped on the street, there's like a path shoveled through the snowbank. It was pretty high, I guess about 3 feet high or more. And John got out and he went in. They had a little duffel bag. So I'd asked Meghan what's up, and she said they're trying to hustle up some money. But just on that little short drive over there, I could see like the headlight was flickering, and that kind of made me paranoid. I told her I had a probation violation and I was just paranoid.
And just to clarify, you were paranoid because you had an active warrant out of another county, Becker County, for a burglary charge, and the prosecutor was looking to give you 25 years in that case.
The Becker County prosecutor was on some radio show saying that they had solved this burglary and that my DNA was found at the scene of this burglary, and they were gonna charge me as some type of career offender, and I would get 25 years or something out the deal.
It makes sense why you would be paranoid of doing anything or being anywhere that might draw the attention of law enforcement to you. I know this is a bit of a sidestep, but what was your plan in trying to evade the warrant on the burglary out of Becker County?
I don't know, trying to decide what to do about the warrant, because that just seems kind of extreme. They did go on there and say it was like 25 years or something was what they were going to try to give me for the burglary. I didn't see no reason to voluntarily turn myself in for that.
Yeah, I can see that. So anyway, you were in the car with Meghan, waiting for John to come back, and a flickering headlight, which made you worry that it would draw attention to law enforcement.
I got out the car and popped the hood, and I checked the light. It was just like loose. So I got a cigarette pack, kind of folded it up and wedged it in there tight so it was steady instead of bouncing around. I figured that would be okay, and I just sat back in the driver's seat, and Meghan was on the passenger side, which was against the snowbank. And I don't know if we were there 10 minutes or something. John came out, and Meghan pushed open her door, just kind of opened into the little clearing through the snowbank, and she got in the back seat. So John got in, and they said we were going over to Meghan's current boyfriend's sister's apartment. And it wasn't too far. They let me drive. They told me which way to go, and it was maybe, I don't know, 20 blocks or something. But we got over there, and we got out, and there was a lady standing right at the end of the sidewalk there smoking a cigarette or something. And we just said hi and went by and went into the apartment. And I'd had my little bottle of Durango tequila. I'd grabbed it before I left. And they had a little bottle of vodka, like those plastic traveler ones. So we just sat around BSing and having a drink. And Meghan was on the phone, and she talked to Cassie because Cassie said, well, there's not supposed to be anybody else at the apartment. And she said she had to use John's phone, so he was there. And she said, well, there better not be anybody else there. They talked a couple times. At one of the times, it was kind of threatening, well, I'll have somebody come over there and check and all of this and that, and there better not be anybody there.
And what was the relationship between Meghan, John, and Cassie?
John was just a friend of everybody involved. Meghan was dating Cassie's brother. Meghan had the key. Chris Cruz is Cassie's brother, and that's who Meghan was dating. Chris was gone. He was down in Texas. The story was that him and his friend were going down there to go visit family. So Meghan was on the phone with Cassie, and we could actually hear Cassie yelling over the phone at Meghan. And I'm just drunk and paranoid. And so Meghan called Chris, and she talked, I don't know, I think she talked to him a couple times, and he was supposed to call his sister. While we were sitting there, I had my bead bag. I was just kind of trying to, showing off what I had in there, telling him about my moccasin project I had been planning on doing. John said he would drive over to the res to bring us back over there. It's like a 80 miles or something from Fargo, Moorhead area over to where we lived in Nadawash, over on the White Earth Indian Reservation. We had some NX, and we put them on a plate, a couple of them, and we crushed them up and we snorted them. And I should know better than that, because any of that stuff, I've tried it before, and that stuff just puts me to sleep. Any kind of those pills. And Meghan said she couldn't because she had to do a UA for Indian child welfare. So it was just me and John. And as it's all going on, well, she's on the phone. This got the phone calls between her and Cassie and her and Chris. And finally, we decided to go over to see Liz. She wasn't answering the phone. And we were going to try to hustle up some money and go get some more alcohol before it got too late. John went out to the car. He started the car. It's the middle of winter, so it's pretty cold out. And I went out there sitting, wait for them. And I fell asleep sitting in the car. When I woke up, well, must have been pretty late. I guess, I don't know, disorientated or whatever is the right word, but I figured that I would go see what Liz was doing, you know. So I went over there. I got over to the apartment, 10 blocks, I think, from the apartment where Liz was to Cassie Cruz's apartment. Well, I got over there. There's a parking lot in back of the apartment. Went around the block and got into the parking lot. The back door, waiting for somebody to come out and open the door, because the doors needed a key to get into the building. There wasn't any buzzers or anything like that. It was kind of the same thing there. I was just waiting and sitting in the warm car and just passed out in there for a while till, I don't know, it had to have been close to morning. Besides the alcohol, I guess the Xanax must have been a major factor. When I woke up, and now I'm kind of worried. Well, here I got this guy's car, and I know I got to try to get back over to where they are, but when I drove that way, I didn't know where I was going. I'm not overly familiar with the area, so I started driving, and I didn't know where to go until finally I just stopped. I didn't want to get pulled over or anything like that, so I stopped in the parking lot at, I think it was the building on the opposite side of the block from there. Because when I woke up in the morning, then I heard and I could see the fire truck down the alley. At that point, I had to get the hell out there. Anytime there's lights and sirens, it's not somewhere I want to be. So I got to Nadawash over at my nephew's, and I just parked there, and I grabbed my stuff and went in, went to sleep. And that was it until, well, I guess it was that day he came in. I woke up, he had I was sleeping on the couch, and he pulled the blanket off me and he said, "What's up?" And like, nothing, you know. I still had my bottle of tequila. That was sitting on the table. He grabbed that and finished it off and left. And that was it. That's all I heard until that night. I'm not even sure what time it was. It was dark out, you know. I got up and I went and walked over to my sister's house. It was maybe half a mile or something. I thought, you know, now I'm sobering up, and now I'm wondering what about the car, and you know, so I figured I'd go over to my sister's, use the phone, and see what we could do. I walked across town. I wasn't hiding or anything like that, you know. I just got over there, and there was nobody when I came in. Her car was gone, and I went in and, you know, kicked the shoes off and jacket and all that. And then my brother-in-law, Sam, Big Sam, he came up from the basement. He was like, you know, surprised, and like, I thought they said you might have burnt up in that house.
So at this point, you still didn't know about the fire or the fact that Meghan and John were dead?
No.
So you had no idea what Sam was talking about when he said, "Oh, I thought you might have been burned up in that house."
No, I mean, everything was normal. He said that they found 2 bodies, and they thought it was me and Meghan, or people, I don't know if the police did, but at least at home, they thought it was me and Meghan.
How did anyone on the reservation know that you had ever been at that apartment?
Sarah Bush had said that she put us together to get a ride back to the res. She provided the information. Or that's who I had talked to the night before, and that's who kind of set it up. But then police pulled up in front of the house, and Megan's mother lived right next door. So they pulled up, and then another one pulled up, and now there's a whole bunch of cars there, and I'm like, I'm freaking out now. I gotta get the hell out of here. And I got my clothes back on and took off. That was, I headed back over to Little Sam's. Now I'm hiding, because I don't know what the heck is going on, but I know there was 2 bodies there, and when I left, there was 2 people there, I didn't really know what was going on, because the first cop there, he stopped right in front of our driveway,
So at that point, did anybody know that you were at your sister's house except for Sam?
No, him seeing me and the information he provided, we were just both kind of dumbfounded. But I knew there was police at the end of the driveway, so I had to get away somewhere. And they were there to notify Megan's mother that they identified the body.
So what did you do after you saw the police next door at Megan's mother's house?
I went back over to Little Sam's, and I mean there's really no words for it, because I knew I had just left there. I got John's car, and more likely than not, that's who the other body was, the other person. And I didn't know, I had absolutely no clue about what to do or anything, Sam, he was like, "What's going on?" I said, "I don't know, but I'm in trouble." It was kind of a teary moment, and gave him a hug. My nephew, he's a good kid. Kind of hugged for a minute, and he left to go make sure family knew that he had seen me and that it wasn't me in the fire. After he left, there was half a dozen cars pulled up out in the street and in the driveway, and apparently it was the same ones that were just over at Megan's mother's place, and it was all their family. They had heard something. The story was kind of confused, because Sarah didn't know. I said, well, maybe, I think when we had talked, I'd said maybe I'll try to ask my nephew Sam or something if he could come get us, And I'd never gotten a hold of him, but when she talked to people, said that maybe Sam was going to pick them up or something. And so I don't know if they came looking for me or if they came looking to question him, but it was a mob, and they started pounding and kicking on the door, and I just sat down with my back against the door and my feet against the island, and they didn't know I was there. But from the story, Sarah is part of that family also, she's trying to figure it out. So she had told everybody the story. Well, Tracy was called to get a ride back, and Megan said she had a ride, so I put them together, and I don't know what ride they got, but maybe Tracy was going to call his nephew Sam to ask him to come pick him up, and just all rumors or speculation, trying to figure out what happened. So everybody's been talking, and I don't know exactly what went on, but I'm thinking they came to ask my nephew Sam. They were a grieving family trying to figure out what's going on. But at the same time, it was a mob to me. Finally, somebody said, well, he's not here, because all of the lights pretty much were out, and they all left, and I can't, this is crazy. I just grabbed I grabbed a good blanket and a carpet for a ground mat, and I went and set up a little shelter out in the woods and slept out there.
So at this point, you begin to realize that you're going to be looked at as a suspect from the circumstances of you having been in the apartment. Everyone who was there with you is dead, and you show back up on the reservation in John's car.
Yeah.
So what was your thought process going out into the woods? What were you hoping that might do for you in your situation?
Well, that night was just to not be murdered or something. I mean, it's frightening to be in front of a mob, and that was certainly a mob that was there that night. I'd seen Sam, Big Sam, and I'd seen Little Sam, and I didn't know what was going on. I just knew I had to try to be out of the situation. So I went not too far into the woods. There's spots right around that area where we used to go when we were kids, you know. And I just went up there and set me up a little campsite for that night. And then the next day, I came back over to the trailer, and then Little Sam came and showed up. And all this time, John's car is still parked in the driveway, you know. And I said, well, look, I need to get this car out of here, and I need to try to get back over towards the Fargo Moorhead area, you know, so I could try to talk to the police. That was the plan.
So you wanted to talk to the police at this point, probably from a safe distance, because your biggest fear was still getting arrested for your warrant out of Becker County. But obviously you knew that rumors were circulating around about you, and that one of those rumors was that you might be responsible for the murders.
Right. I just had the idea that I could get over there and try to talk to them or something and get this worked out, whatever it was. And so the car was like out of gas. Sam went and got the gas can. He put gas in the car and started it up so it warmed up a little bit, and I went and jumped in the car and left, and he followed me in his car. We drove north up towards Lingby and hit one of the government roads, and the idea came to burn the car just because he was scared about. He was in the car. He had started it. I mean, he had been in there a couple times the day before, and I thought the best way to keep him uninvolved or out of the whole situation was just to burn the car. That was like, it wasn't the only option, but at that moment, that was the best option. So that's what I did, and got in the car with him, and we drove towards Fargo. We made it to Bijou, and there was a lot of people there. I mean, just a surprising number. And we were trying to find somebody that I could hire for a ride or something to get over there, because Sam has this big boat of a car with a missing muffler, so it's just loud as heck, and he uses a lot of gas, but nothing was working. We went over to one of his friends that used the phone, got a hold of Elizabeth, and told her that I was trying to get back over there, and would she get a motel because I wanted to try to talk to the police. And she said she was going to do that, so me and Sam left, and we headed towards Fargo Moorhead. We got over there, and we spent considerable time looking around for her and trying to call the phone. We didn't have a phone on us. We were in the restaurant using the phone and at pay phones, and it was very, very tense. And eventually we stopped by at Motel 6 and waited, and pretty close to the tipping point. We were just going to leave. Then that's when Liz walked by and got out and went up to the motel room. And during this time we were there, sitting in the car and moving around, and it just seemed like the police are patrolling constantly. So that raised the anxiety level a little. It just seemed They kept driving by. I couldn't do it. I told Sam, look, just go down to the car, start the car, and then when you pull out, I'll come down there. You know, that kind of abandoned all plans. There was no thought but to flee. I mean, we didn't even stop to get gas. We made it back to Bazoo, and we stopped at Simon Kid's place again. He was going to Monoman, pick his girlfriend up from work, and so I asked Sam, I'll go with him and, you know, get me a flashlight, maybe some kind of snacks or something. And so he took the gas can and rode with him to work. I waited at the house. They got back. I told them I was the same thing I told Liz, that I thought it'd be best. I'm just going to go hang out in the woods until this thing is done.
So your thought process at that point was just to find somewhere to wait it out. Basically take yourself out of the equation in hopes that they would find the people who were really responsible for the murders.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to find out who did this. So we headed back to the res and told them to take the Pine Bend Road, because this is a familiar area for me. I grew up right in the area and in the woods there. It was real dark, so we're driving really slow so I could try to find a spot where I could get off the road without leaving tracks or a trail for anybody to follow. And I found a place. I told them to stop. I took what we had and put it in my pockets, and it was just totally dark, couldn't see anything. I was just walking in the dark, and there's like almost a little valley before the woods, just a short one. I walked across there, and once I got into the woods, I just dug a hole and picked up a bunch of small sticks and started a fire. I had a little fire going there, and laid some longer sticks across the hole and laid that blanket across there, so I was in a little cocoon. I stayed there till the morning. Next morning, got up and just started building myself a little camp. I just spent the day building a little lean-to, found plenty of materials out in the woods. My only thought was just to stay out of the way until they solved these murders. The following day, Sam came back and he brought me some supplies, food and cloth and a couple extra things. I think it was Wednesday the following week I decided to go see what was happening, and I walked to the nearest place I knew was in Roy Lake. That's where an Almo. She's not really a blood relative, but my uncle was married to her mother for most of our lives. So I stayed there and I asked, like, what's going on, tried to get information and whatnot, and they told me all of the various rumors, and I wasn't concerned that any of them would say anything, because I've known these people my entire life. They know.
So these were people that you expected wouldn't believe the rumors that were circulating round about you being responsible.
No, that I would expect them not to. These are people that know me. Melanie was at home. I told her, well, I need some supplies, and she was like, you can have whatever you want. And she helped me gather up some things. I got a little frying pan, saucepan, a saw, a screwdriver, and a scissors. There was a number of different hammers. I grabbed the smallest one because out in the woods or traveling, weight is your biggest consideration. So I grabbed the smallest one. Everything I was using before, I just had the pocket knife and tape. But the next day, I called Monica in the afternoon. I said I needed a ride. I needed to get back to my campsite. By this time, I know that they're accusing me, or at least that's part of the murder, or part of the rumor. when they're talking about murder. So I was concerned about the Becker County thing, but I still wasn't overly concerned about the murders. I mean, people investigate this stuff. It shouldn't be hard to find the culprit. I called Monica and she asked her if she would give me a ride, and she said yeah, and we got out to Pine Bend.
So the hammer you just mentioned, that was one of the alleged murder weapons. But that was given to you by Melanie when you were staying out in the woods nearly a week after the murders, which probably explains why they never found any of the victims' DNA on that hammer.
Yes, everything at that campsite was brought after I was there. I mean, it wasn't, haul all these murder tools with me out to the woods and wait for somebody to find them. That's utter stupidity. I can't believe they were able to imply that that's what happened and somebody listened to them.
Did your defense team call any of these people to testify they had given you these tools after the murder?
No. We got out to Pine Bend. I asked him on it. I said, well, look, can you get me a phone, And, that way I could try, because her sister interacts regularly with the police chief, Mike LaRock, deputy chief. He passed on here a couple of years ago, but, they're both really good people that she was well known to. And she said, they had a discussion about going to them. So I'd asked her about getting the phone so I could try to call one of them to set up a meeting to talk to them or something. She said she would. She left there, called her sister, and so that day they stopped and picked up a phone. But they couldn't find their way to my campsite. I mean, they must have drove down the road a few times, but they missed it, so I didn't see any of them again for a week. It was the following Tuesday when I was looking up at the road because I heard vehicles going by, and then they stopped. I had two different paths into my campsite, and they stopped at the edge of the trees, and people started getting out. They came down to one path, and I just grabbed what I could, and I took off. I was down to the edge of the trees and running across an open spot, and I heard 3 shots. The person that I'd seen, the one in the lead, had coveralls, and he was carrying a rifle, and I knew who it was, but I was just gone. During my time out there, I had prepared trails going in every direction so that if I had to get away, I knew where I was going or what I was doing. I had a clear path at any rate. So I ran down the trail at the edge of the woods where I crossed this little clearing. Then that's when I heard the 3 shots behind me, and I couldn't do nothing but keep going. Of course, I didn't get very far, Again, we got running through deep snow was a lot more difficult than a person would think. But even the little bit of stuff I had in the backpack was just too much. I took out a flashlight, lighter, and dry socks and whatnot, and I just buried the rest of the backpack in the snow and kept going until it started getting dark. I had to cross a river, and I crossed the river and fell through the ice, of course. I was near the edge, so I got a hold of the grass and I got out right away, and then I just packed myself in snow, because the snow was absorbent. So the snow absorbed all of the water that was on me. There was no other option except to keep going. So I went until it was good and dark, and I had a spot where, the snow was maybe 3 feet deep in the woods, and I dug out a hole in the snow and built the fire in there, and then so I could take off my clothes, hang them up, and dry them out. After that was all done, I decided just to go back the way I came. I followed my trail all the way back towards towards morning, I got back and I kind of snuck up on my camp and there was nobody there. And I went down the trail. I could see on the trail the boot prints, like from sorrel winter type boots, and you could see where somebody kneeled down there. But they never came all the way into my camp. I spent the day getting all my stuff together, and then I started walking towards Roy Lake again. I got to Roy Lake, and Melanie wasn't there, but my cousin Chris, she was there, and a couple of her kids were there. And as soon as I got in, she said, well, don't trust Melanie, and just let that go, because there was no other information with it. Somebody had told those people where I was at. You know, I had told Melanie that I walked there from Pine Bend, which was my mistake, I guess. But I just couldn't imagine that she would say anything, but somebody did. Somebody told them I was along the Pine Bend Road. The following day, I got up. Melanie had came back, and she was kind of emotional for some reason, and she was going to Bemidji to go shopping or to do something. Before she left, she was crying, give me a hug. I told her, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. And so she left, and Christine came back. It was just a real funny feeling. One of the kids got a phone call. I knew it was Melanie, and I asked them what's going on. They said, she just wants to know how many people are here so that she can stop at McDonald's or something and pick up some food. And it was just strange. I went downstairs and I was sitting in the room where I slept that night. And I was like, the heck with this. I took off out the door and headed into the brush with basically just what I had on. And I got into the brush and there was a deer stand back in the woods, and I sat there for a long time, and I thought I seen flashes or something by the house, but I couldn't make out what was going on. I was there for a while, and people started coming into the woods. The whole house was surrounded, and I got away from there. There was an army of people there.
So who were these people? Were they just vigilantes like before, or was it real law enforcement?
It was the police and the game wardens and the state troopers, and there's about 15 or more cop cars there. Melanie had called the police and told them I was at the house.
Wow. So what you had been told about not to trust Melanie was actually true. You were like family. Why would she turn on you?
She thought she was going to get a reward or something, but she didn't. It's good enough for her. But yeah, I was sitting back in the woods. I didn't know what made me run, but I knew I had to get the heck out there. And as soon as I did, that's when they all showed up. I was almost going to walk back to the house. I was sitting up in the tree smoking a cigarette, wondering what's going on. And then I heard people coming through the woods. They were following my tracks through the snow. So I snuck up to the other road, and they knew the direction I was going into the woods. So they sent a couple vehicles that were parked right across the road in an approach from where I was at. They sent those vehicles heading north up the road to try to cut me off somewhere. And as soon as they took off, then I crawled across the road and headed in the other direction.
Wow, that's just wild.
I guess it was dumb luck or whatever. If anybody would have lifted up their head, they would have seen me. I made it across the road, and then I got back into the brush a little bit and jumped over the snowbank, so there was no tracks, and I just went through the woods, and I came across somebody's cabin in the woods, and there was a dog barking, and I had to run the other way. And when I finally made it back to the highway, there was a state trooper sitting up on the hill, and as soon as he left, I cut across. I went running across the road, and I made it back on over to the lake and just walked across the lake over to my uncle's house. Well, first I tried to walk back to Melanie's, and when I got up there was still probably eight or 10 cop cars still sitting there. This was after dark, And so I went over to my uncle's house. It was about a mile down the road, walked across the lake, got over there, and it had a big old pine tree there. So I climbed up to the top of that tree, and I could kind of see across to where Melanie's place was. After an hour or two, I was watching, and then I seen all of the cars leave. I was thinking, damn, are they coming over here? Because my uncle's dog was sitting down at the bottom of the tree barking at me the whole time. He'd come out a couple times, told him to shut up. So I got down from the tree and I went and told him I need a phone. So he went and got the phone. I called Pam. My sister Lisa, Pam, and Monica were together, and they were concerned because of all of the police activity, and all these guys running around with shotguns and assault rifles. They were concerned that something would happen if there wasn't observers. So there was a number of people driving back and forth while all of this stuff was going on at Malmo's. So I called, and they were already on the road. I asked them to come get me at Roy Lake, and I ran through snowmobile trails over to the neighbors. So I stood there and watched Pam and Sister Monica and them. They drove by, and there was nothing, nothing suspicious. I called, and they came back, and they picked me up. And then we went from there. We went north up the roadhouse. Asked them. They had the phone with them, and of course, it was still in the package. They ain't charged up or turned on or anything. There was a phone card there, but that don't help anything in that state. So we went to the roadhouse, and I just slept out in the car. They went in and had a drink and bought a bunch of snacks and stuff, and I knew I had to move my camp. So I'd asked my sister, I told her, well, look, can you tell Sam, put some food and supplies, whatever, together, and because the phone needed to be charged up and turned on. They were going to drop it off the following morning. Then I figured I should just take the trails to a new place. I didn't hear them the next morning. I don't know how, but I slept through their arrival, and when I did finally get up, I went out to the road. They had found a place, though, because there was a bag, had the phone, and some food and stuff in there, and so I went back and I was getting my camp all prepared, As soon as it was dark, then I was going to take off. I thought I could walk on the road, and it would be a lot easier. I could make some distance, and that's where I laid down to rest for a minute. That's when the police showed.
Wow. So after all that, you sat down to rest, and right then the police show up.
Yep. By the time I realized they were there, it was too late to try getting away, at least safely.
That is all the time we have for this episode on Tracy Zornes' case. In our next episode, Tracy will take us through his arrest, indictment on the murders of his friends Meghan Londo and John Cadot, his trial, and the evidence that could exonerate him that was collected but never tested. Join next time as we continue our one-on-one interview with Tracy Zornes. This is Just Unjust, and I am your host, Cassie Bordeaux.